The system, and that on the date of the election, none of these people was in the system, even for purposes of that maintenance. My ladies and my lords, it would make a lot of sense if somebody said that so and so got into the system and they interfered with the system in this manner. It is not enough for somebody to say Gumbo was found in the system, because what matters here is the allegation around manipulation and alteration of the results. Now, if we do not get into this space, what exactly are we talking about? I would want to again equate this to a situation where in your house you decide to assign a plumber to do for you some work. When the plumber comes to do the work, then you raise an alarm and say, oh wait, there's a plumber in my house. How is a plumber to do the work that he's supposed to be doing in the house? Certainly, it does not make much sense. If you expect the plumber to fix the plumbing problem, then certainly you must give him access to the plumbing problem that you have. Now, I have looked at, and we've tried perusing through all these documents. There is not a single form that has been presented which appears to suggest, even in the lightest of ways, that there was any interference. And again, just relating this to the architecture of our elections, if at all there was any such interference, it would have been an interference that goes into the numbers. Now, because we have not seen that, is this the case then, therefore, why numbers has become a very dicey and perhaps an area where everybody would want to avoid or run away from? In the petition, I suppose the first and most important thing is you must demonstrate that you had specific numbers. Even if there's to be contest, let it be contest between this set of numbers and the other set of numbers. It can't be a contest between the man who was said to be the man in the middle and numbers. If that man was in the middle for sure and he had a job to do, then that is a man who slept on his job. Because we are not shown anything that he perhaps could have done while in the space that he is alleged to have done anything that would have interfered with the will of the people. Hilda continues to wonder in her affidavit as to why their boss, who is a commissioner, would expose them to that extent that they mention names of people who are employees and staff of the institution doing their legitimate work. Then you cast aspersions without basis that they were engaged in a criminal enterprise. My ladies and my lords, it might sound like a light issue, but we must have seen it in social media, in mainstream media, that these people, who some of whom ran this election, have had to go into keeping house. They've had to go into hiding because people read these sort of things and they imagine that this is the gospel truth. Certainly, this is not a light issue. Yesterday, there was extensive submission as to whether this court is handicapped in terms of dealing with some of these things. Now, as the Iebc on the one hand tries to improve the system based on the law and the guidance from this court, I think there's also a responsibility that should attach or follow where we have very deliberate attempts at misleading the court. If we look at, for instance, the logs that have been attached by John Mark Gidongo, if it turns out to be a forgery, does it not disclose an offense? It is not in my province to make that determination, but where I see it, it bothers me because as we go into elections this year, in 2027, we need to then sanitize some of these things that we do. And one of the ways of sanitizing them is by holding people to account, so that if you present evidence that is obviously not true or that is falsified, then you must stop to ask yourself whether there would be a consequence or not. That is the only way through which even this court would be able to sit, to be able to determine or preside over any of those matters that are presented with ease. I need to add that at the Bomas, which is the National Tallying Center, when the returning officers got to Bomas, what happened? Now, in the floor of Bomas, these returning officers would come with their original Form 34As, hand them to the national returning officer for purposes of a presidential election. After that, they would be subjected to an ICT team, and that ICT team was not sitting in isolation. They sat with the agents of the parties, they sat with observers, and what they were doing was to again confirm those security features we had spoken about. After that, they went into the detail around the numbers, comparing what they had in the Form 34As that were in the portal and the Form 34As that were then presented, the physical hard copies. From the direction and guidance of this court in 2017, Raila Odinga, what the commission was to do was to record those errors. I confirm, my ladies and my lords, that the commission did exactly that. The error report has been availed to this court, but of significance is that as they were preparing that error report, a copy of that error report was also availed to the agents of all the parties. This is important in the architecture of our elections. It is important because, as opposed to asking the court to now go through scrutiny, it will be a question of saying, wait a minute, in the error report, there's a difference between the results that came from Member Primary School, which I have either in my carbon copy from my agent, or that was presented by the returning officer, and what we are now seeing in the portal. That is the only way through which somebody could make an allegation that would stand the test of time. If you have that, then certainly, if you apply yourself to understand the architecture of our electoral platform, then there is really no need to go into scrutiny, because that report is scrutiny by itself. In fact, it was a forensic audit. They had their watermark readers, they had their UV light readers, and these are things that are all contained in the affidavits of these three individuals that I've spoken about. When you take time, you look at that, and it is then our submission that to the extent that there is an allegation that there were interferences or that there were differences between the Form 34As in the portal and the Form 34As physically presented by those returning officers, there was none, and this is verifiable. Indeed, none has been presented before you. The last issue I'm to deal with is whether there was a difference between Form 34As uploaded on the Iebc. Sorry, I think I've gotten into that point as well. And so, there was a question that was raised about Form 34C and the concern about the multiple entries. Submission was made by counsel that the Form 34C is supposed to be generated once. Again, that sort of submission would only come from a false, if not limited, understanding of the process. I say that because as the verification and retallying of the Form 34As were going on at the National Tallying Center, whenever they completed the verification and retallying of a constituency, they would then upload it onto the Form 34C after the completion of the verification. That then meant that that process had to be an incremental process. That is why when somebody says that there is a gentleman called so-and-so who accessed the server or the rear end of the result transmission network 1,000 times, it simply speaks to the fact that they had to make entries. It should not be lost that we were using, according to the jurisprudence in MATIANG'I, results from the polling station, which is the original Form 34A. Now, if we look at the number of the polling stations, it speaks to about 46,000 and a few hundreds. It then meant that a corresponding number of entries, entries had to be made on that Form 34C. And that, because I'd said it is supposed to be done incrementally, I would want to refer for clarity again to the affidavit of Commissioner Justice Nyang'aya. At paragraph 51 of the affidavit of Commissioner Justice Nyang'aya, he says, or he acknowledges, that indeed it would be inaccurate, impractical to expect the 7 commissioners to be the ones to do all these specific assignments that the commission is supposed to be doing. Similarly, and by parity of thought, when the law says that the commission shall, for purposes of this, generate that Form 34C, the law does not contemplate that the chairperson of a commission will sit with a laptop and make 46,000 plus entries by himself. This is what my learned senior counsel Kamau Karori was speaking to. This is what is contemplated under Section 11 and 11A of the Iebc Act. And so, if we then tie this to the submission that he had earlier on made, that if we read under Article 138(3)(c), the Independent Electoral Commission to mean the entire institution, then we would not run into the problems that we are running into. Because as we saw, and as will be demonstrated in by our subsequent speakers, that exactly is what happened. The entire bureaucracy or the entire institution of Iebc participated in that process. As I conclude, I want to make a submission that when we make these allegations in our election petitions, perhaps we need to also ask ourselves if we have done that which the law contemplates of us. And that if the law gives you an opportunity to choose your agent for purposes of verifying or speaking to you in relation to the processes in the election, if you fail to present an agent, would it be appropriate to then come and burden the subsequent processes through applications such as what we're seeing for scrutiny? Because the law contemplates that that agent should be able to point you to the fact there's a problem in a particular primary school. Go there. Don't ask for the entire of a constituency. Don't ask for the entire of a county. And I think that has been the jurisprudence that has been developed. It then follows that we must sanctify the place of agents in our elections. And because agents are like our spouses, you choose your own. You choose the one you trust. If you get, nobody imposes an agent on you. If you choose one you don't trust, then really you can't blame anyone. If you choose one who does not understand why you assigned them that responsibility, again, you cannot possibly blame anyone. So, as I seek to take my seat, we ask, my ladies and my lords, that in the usual strong manner in which you've spoken in relation to these issues, and following the very lengthy submissions that we had yesterday, we also rely on you to help us clean this electoral system, so that as the commission does its part, on the other hand, the public and every other person must also do their part. I am most obliged, and thank you for according me this opportunity.